presentation says it's present status and future for Jamaica's ginger, which has been a very strong collaborative effort, including the Ministry of Agriculture and the Food and Agriculture Organization. And the main representative from each group would have been shown there. Jamaica's agriculture has evolved over the years. Our country lying in the Caribbean, in the tropics, that location has given us, one would think, a year-round tropical ambience, which has resulted in very rich soils and climatic conditions, which make it possible for the production of a wide variety of crops. And most of these crops would have come, or a lot of them would have fall under the category of traditional crops, which form the base of our export market. Readily coming to mind is coffee, cocoa, pimento, banana, coconut, and of course, ginger. The map on the right is showing the major producing areas of most of these crops. And to the far east would be the location of the famous Blue Mountain Coffee Zone. Next slide, please. Why have we decided to focus on ginger? That's an interesting question, and one that we'd like to delve in just now. Next slide, please. Ginger is not native to Jamaica. It was introduced in about 1525. But once it was introduced, it seemed to have taken a likeness for the environment, the soils, climatic conditions, and it responded very well to the agronomic practices that were applied to its cultivation process. At the same time, once it was produced, there seemed to have been a likeness by the international market, which was, it seemed, attracted by its culinary and medicinal influences. So much so was the adaptation of ginger that Jamaica became one of the three largest producers of ginger, along with Sierra Leone and India, up to about the 1960s. That is testimony to the adaptation of the crop and the influence of the environmental conditions, which would have allowed it to grow that much, as well as the international demand, which was there, because if there wasn't that the international demand, then the production would not have grown as it did. Production then reached close to about 2 million kilograms during those years. Next, please. Next. As I pointed out, the collaboration has been with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Food and Agricultural Organization. This collaboration has seemed to easily come together because of the common thread with both organizations, wherein with the global call for addressing the issue of peace and well-being of human beings through the Sustainable Development Goals. Both FAO and the Jamaica through the ministries share those sentiments, and in particular, SDG number 1, 2, 10, and 13 are goals that we share in common. A lot of our farmers are small, follow in what you would call a small farmer category, and they are in rural areas. So their survival is certainly influencing the socioeconomic activities of those areas. So it is of significant interest that we try to address activities which will build the outputs of these farmers, while at the same time maintaining a climatic positive attitude in order to protect their livelihoods and protect their well-being. Next slide, please. Jamaican ginger has grown so much that when you look on the international scene, when you look at these ginger products, the only thing they have in common with Jamaica is the name Jamaican. They are not produced in Jamaica, but they are reflective or being used. The name Jamaica is being used to reflect ginger, which is an important point to say that Jamaican ginger has been recognized for its intrinsic values, that world users would go at length to add the name Jamaica to ginger in order to give it a marketing appeal. So if that is the case, we believe there is already a positive for us to now build on this intrinsic value which a product has, and to give it the real combination with the name Jamaica to take it to the next level. Next slide, please. The challenge we have is that the production beyond the 1960s has not been what it should be. There has been a progressive decline. In 2014, we saw 6,500 metric ton production. And when you look at the graph, you realize that in 5 years, that production was half. And for a number of reasons, which we'll get into. So there is a demand, but there is a production issue, or there has been a production issue, which is part of what this drive is trying to address. Next slide, please. So we have a demand which has been estimated through efforts by the FAO of about 16,200 metric tons. And as you could see from the production slide, we are nowhere near that. Next slide, please. So we are in effect only producing about 19% of what the real demand is. So there's a huge gap of about 81% of ginger that is to be produced because of that demand which we have seen in the marketplace. And that demand could very well be much more, but that is what we have identified so far. Next slide, please. The other big challenge that has come to impact production is the phenomenal disease known as the Ginger Rhizome Rot, which has impacted the production process in a very significant way at about the time when production seemed to have been going in the positive direction. The disease infect the mother rhizome in a serious way, and also impact newly emerging rhizomes. This, as you may be aware, is a serious challenge to bring about any increase in production. And it is one now that we now have to turn our attention to, which we have been doing to try and arrest that production slide. Next slide, please. Ginger, the beauty about it, if one could say so, is that ginger is seen to be produced, the island is capable of producing ginger in very large areas across the country. So it is not only limited to particular areas. there are pockets across the country which are suitable for ginger. And that's one of the advantages we want to capitalize on once we can correct the problem of the ginger rhizome. Next slide, please. The production and productivity have been declining. So once production declines, of course, productivity naturally will go with that as well. And as we said, when in the 1960s, the production was so high that it was really putting Jamaica on the map as a producing country. Fall back to 2016, and even before that, you are seeing significant declines in those productions, which have not augurs well for us to fulfill the demands of the market demand that exists. Next, please. Continue. In addition to the decline in demand or the decline in production, we have seen also a fallout in the number of persons getting involved in ginger production. I guess because the crop has fallen or the demand has fallen, the issues there exist in the production. Persons no longer find it encouraging to address the issues and to make the crop be a productive or a profitable one. So the decline in the number of farmers certainly would have brought about a decline in the production era, resulting in part of the problem in the decline in production. Next slide, please. On the flip side to that is, well, I guess a case of issue of demand and supply is that the farm gate price for ginger has been increasing since 2015 and increasing at a relatively significant rate over those periods of time. Again, as I said, chances are because of a supply and demand situation. The demand is there, the production is not there, so the farm gate price is going to go up. Next please. One more, right. So what we are seeing is an increase in farm gate price. That does not augur as well for the value added development, because the demand is so high for the fresh ginger and it is not in sufficient quantities, then there is not much to go into the value added activities. So again, that does not augur as well for the development of a real ginger industry. It's just a production of prime material, and that limits the impact the value added could have had on the industry itself. Next slide, please. Right. Okay. What are the problems we have been seeing that has been affecting the production issue? Of course, the rhizome rot, as we mentioned, but there have been the real issue of low productivity. The cost of production has been going up. Cost of labor in Jamaica is very high. The land layout, we do not, as a small island, you do not have large acreages that can lend itself to mechanization. So there is a lot of labor that have to go into land preparation, planting, and harvesting, which brings a high cost to the production process, which is going to limit, because there's a limit to the finance that is to go into those labor. So it's going to limit the impact of activities and limit the impact of the actual cultivation and production output. Again, as I said, primarily because of the land sizes, the use of technology has not been intensive as it could be to make the process much more profitable. And all of those lead to a decline in the supply of ginger. Again, because we're dealing with small farmers, there is a fragmentation of the farmer base. There's a fragmentation of the land use capabilities, because we're talking about land sizes that are small in sizes, resulting in that small area being used for more than one crop. So ginger would be one. There would be the need for other crops, maybe livestock, as is necessary by the farmers. With all of those, the marketing system is not very organized. It's just to allow for a smooth flow from production through to, let's say, a value-added market. And as I indicated, the value-added aspect of things is very almost non-existent. With the low technology use, the fragmentation of land, the output in terms of quality has not always been consistent. And so you with climate change and all of that, you will get a good crop this year, and next year it might not be the same thing, because the input usage, as well as the rotation of the land, the proper preparation of the land, may not always be consistent to allow for a satisfactory quality to come through. Next slide, please. So this calls for a new approach to arrest the problems. Having identified what most of the problems are, there has to be a new approach to see how best we can arrest the problem, bring a turnaround in the ginger industry. And that calls for the use of, first and foremost, data collection. What's happening? What would have been happening over the last couple of years? What's happening now? What are those challenges that the industry is facing? How can we integrate innovation and technology into these activities to bring about competitiveness in the industry? Next slide, please. And so the issue is we have to look at the value chain to see how we can strengthen the value chain in order to strengthen the industry. What are the inputs required? How can we address inputs to bring about an increase in production and productivity? Address the issues of phytosanitary issues. Address the issues of land preparation. Bring about new investment or new investors to the process that will find interest in the industry because of the revolution that they would have seen that is possible in the industry. And to increase the value added, bring about some level of processing so that we now can export not only prime material, not only fresh ginger, but the value added activities arising from the production of ginger. Next slide, please. This, you can click again, please. Next slide. Next. Next. Yes, thanks. So we as I indicated, without good planting material, we are going to be going back to a situation of producing ginger that has been infected over and over by the rhizome rot. So the idea, the initiative is to ensure that we have a certification and inspection system which allows for the production of clean planting material, supported by assessment of those soils to ensure that the clean planting material goes into clean growing environment in order to minimize the impact of the onset of the disease. This started with tissue culture. So initially, a set of ginger was sent overseas to have it cleaned up and returned to produce a tissue culture material, which is now clean material in a laboratory system that is certified to ensure that only clean material is produced. And that goes through a multiplication system, which now allows for the reproduction of this clean planting material to eventually get into the field. All of this is supported by research and development to make sure that we are able to trace the activities and to identify and capture development areas that needs to be multiplied to ensure that the process can move forward with some degree of certainty. While that was taking place, we also look at the business side. Oh no, when you produce clean planting material, how do you move from having clean planting material to having acreages of ginger now ready to go into different aspects of the industry? And so we start to look at what we call a industry business model, identify what are the long-term goals, and how do we execute the different aspects of activities to ensure that we meet those long-term goals. As I said, the first part of that long-term goal is to ensure that you have clean planting material through a certification system. That being established, it's now time to speak to the private sector, have a public-private discussion to assure them of where we want to go, what we are doing to get where we want to go, and to get their input in terms of ideas, desires, and how can we collaborate to now take this into a business model where financing can be had through the private sector. Next slide, please. This is what the certification system looks like, commencing with tissue culture material, producing certified laboratories over a period of time. And then those tissue cultured material are transferred to a public nursery for growing out. And then that's for the generation 1 material. And then those are to be further transferred to the private sector for further cultivation, which would have them ready to go into the field for that large scale production. Next slide, please. Interestingly, part of the new technology that we have brought to the fore is what is called a single bud technology. Initially, ginger was planted where you just select appropriate planting material from as rhizome, and that would be planted again. So in some sense, you would be reducing the saleable material to put into the reproduction phase. We now have looked at this new technology of single bud technology, where arising from the first set or the first generation of planting material, we are now going into dissecting those rhizomes to produce much greater planting material bases in order to expand the production area or the production of planting material. So instead of having one rhizome with just giving you a few nodes here and there in that area, we now expand that to give you much more planting area, much more new plants to be a productive plant going forward. Next slide, please. An important part of the process, we believe, is to have the private sector coming on board and coming on board early. In order to have that, we had to convince them. They had to see the level of continuity, the level of dedication coming from the public sector for them to be interested, and to see it also the possibility of it being a profitable venture. This way, we're able to demonstrate by way of the public-private discussions over time, and to bring them on board to be part of the nursery activities from the onset, so that they can be well a part of the production process going forward. And also to have them being a part of the field activities. So we want the private sector to be involved from nursery right through to the production process. This initial phase of activities, it sees us looking at a 10-hectare pilot project, which is to commence the field plant out in 2022. Once that is established and success would have come about from there, we believe that would be the platform for the increase or improvement in investment for the industry. Next slide, please. So this again would form part of the certified production system, where this 10-hectare pilot project is to give us planting material, material for planting, material for processing, leading into the development of what we call the new value-added ginger industry. There are private sector investors who have the facilities ready to get into the oil resin production, oil resin processing. What they need is this consistent supply of ginger material that is clean from rhizome rot to put into their processing facility. And they are also they have expressed their interest in getting into the production process, which is also a plus for the certified production system that we are putting in place. Next slide, please. So with the certified with the certified production system, what we're looking at is a significant increase in production over what existed from the conventional production system. As we said, very easily because of the increased planting material availability, the increased good agricultural practices to be employed, the involvement of research and development in the process from the beginning, and very importantly, the addition of an irrigation system that will allow for the supply of water on a consistent basis, not relying solely on rainfall. With these measures, without a doubt, we see the industry moving in the right direction of increasing production with the aim of fulfilling the value-added ambitions that we are looking at. Next slide, please. Next. Right. So as I indicated earlier, the rapid multiplication technology will see us reducing the number of planting materials from what existed in the traditional sense, where you had approximately 2,400 kilograms for 1 hectare, down to 800 kilograms using the single bud technology. So there's much more material that can be available for planting, as well as to go into the production process, whether it is the fresh market or into the value added market. So these are some of the technologies, the kind of technologies we are looking at to make sure we add viability to the ginger industry, and to bring about an attraction of investors, both at the nursery production level as well as in the field activities. Next slide, please. Next. Right. What this will bring about is a decrease in the cost of production for planting, establishing ginger. With the conventional method, it would have cost you 130 Jamaican dollars per kilogram for planting material. With the certified method, you are seeing there's a 40% reduction in those planting material, which certainly will mean a lot to the farmer's bottom line in terms of his return on investment. So the technology is bringing about increasing planting material availability at a reduced cost for those planting materials. Next slide, please. As I indicated, the FAO has been the base of the thrust, but there has been a wide cross-section of support. And some of the things we have derived from that collaboration with the FAO is improved infrastructure. These would have come through research and the broad adaptation of these technology into the operation of activities. A certification manual or certification manuals would have been developed out of that, so that there is a framework for us to operate on, some kind of a guidance in terms of a manual prepared document to make sure that the activities can be replicated. And of course, research and development to make sure that what is going out to the farmer eventually has been tried, tested, and proven. So there has been a strong collaborative effort going back from 2017 up to 2019, but to date, that effort has been continuing to make sure that we have somewhat of a foolproof system in place on which to establish a truly strong ginger industry. Next slide, please. I think we have seen this slide already. Just continue, please. As I indicated earlier, the business model is to, we have gone through that level of discussion, intense discussion with the private sector, to make sure that we can come up with a model that will give them some kind of a hope to invest. Even if the outlay of cost looks a bit high, there is the assurance that they will earn their investment, because if once they follow the procedures that would have been laid out for them to go through the nursery operations, utilize the good agricultural practices, and with an established market, because that's one of the things that we wanted to be assured of, that once you go into the production process, there's an established market to which you are linked from the beginning. And so there is no doubt as to where are you going to sell this product once it is produced. And this has also been one of the bedrocks of investor interest, in investor confidence in trying to push and get into the ginger production operations. Next slide, please. Again, as I indicated earlier, data, the use of data and the need to capture data is very important, because 95% of the ginger that is produced now is finding its way into the fresh market. Is that the only market? Certainly not. But because of the low production, that is, you satisfy the first, what you would call a low-hanging fruits, which is the fresh market. There's for us, the ultimate goal is getting to the nutraceuticals, but we do not see us getting there unless there is a strong production process, which has to be led by the assurance of clean certified planting material. So that is why we had spent so much time trying to establish that aspect of the production chain.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, can you wind up, sir? Because we have some questions for you also. So we have to wind up and move on to the next presentation. So I think, sir, if you can wind up quickly, then that would be good, sir.
I think I'm at the close to the end. So next slide, please. So, right. As I indicated, there is investor interest, and one is highlighted there, a company which has over 18 years experience in existence in their production process. They are a public listed company on the Jamaican Stock Exchange with very great interest in developing the oleoresin activities. Next slide, please. And so these are the steps which I would have outlined earlier in trying to mitigate the challenges that have confronted the industry over the years. And you would have seen the steps to try and overcome these many challenges. Next slide. The public-private partnership, as I outlined, commences from the nursery with laboratory involvement right through to get to the processing activities, all with the aim of strengthening the value chain development. So public players, producers, and processors all forming a part of this partnership. Next slide, please. And as we indicated, the aim is to scale up for the future to make sure that this industry stands on very good, solid footing, with production coming from the tissue culture right through to buyers, linking buyers and producers in the process. Next slide, please. This outlines the series of activities that would have been started from 2017, and it follows on, as I indicated, the final step, which is the running of the pilot project, which is to, in its middle stage of being executed just now. Next slide, please. The next step is to scale up production at the tissue culture, nursery, and field production level, with the final aim of meeting our goals of having a solid nutraceutical industry as well as other value-added industry going forward. Next slide, please. All of this to be built on research, production, agro-processing, and a good, strong marketing system, all of which the framework have already begun and will be solidified as we go forward. Next slide. And these are the collaborators we have from the ministry through private sector, education, and promotional agencies. So it's a very strong collaboration, which we believe will bring about a level of success to what we are doing. Next slide, please. And so for further contact, it's up there. But again, thanks for having us, and thanks for giving us this opportunity to present what we are trying to do to revitalize the ginger industry in Jamaica. Thanks again.